The morning the black SUVs rolled into the narrow street, everyone thought someone important had died. Four long, tinted vehicles glided to a stop in front of a tiny, half-rusted auto repair shop with the flickering signboard that read Rafiq Auto Works. Neighbors peeked from their balconies. Mechanics from nearby garages stepped out, wiping grease from their hands. In a place where people argued over 5 rupees, vehicles like that didn't just appear without a reason. And inside that small shop, a single father named Rafiq stood frozen, a wrench slipping from his trembling fingers as he wondered if his quiet acts of kindness had finally caught up with him. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the smallest good deed can change life, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that humanity is still alive. Rafiq's life had never been easy. At 36, his hands looked like they belonged to a man twice his age. They were cracked, scarred, permanently stained with engine oil that no soap could wash away. 5 years earlier, he had buried his wife after a sudden illness drained every rupee they had saved. Since then, it had just been him and his 8-year-old daughter, Hira, living in a single rented room behind the workshop. The room smelled of metal and detergent, with one narrow bed pushed against the wall and a small stove balanced on a wooden crate. At night, when the city quieted down, Rafiq would lie awake listening to Hira's soft breathing and promise himself he would never let her feel the absence of her mother more than she already did. The workshop barely survived month to month. Some days he repaired 3 motorcycles and earned enough to buy vegetables and pay a fraction of the electricity bill. Other days, he sat for hours waiting for customers, staring at the cracked clock on the wall, calculating which expense could be postponed again. School fees were his biggest fear. He would rather skip meals than let Hira miss a day of school. Education, he believed, was her escape from the life that had trapped him. It was during one of those slow afternoons that he first noticed her. She sat across the street near a broken bus stop bench, wrapped in a faded shawl despite the heat. Her hair was streaked with gray, her face lined not just by age but by exhaustion. People walked past her as if she were invisible. Some avoided eye contact, others wrinkled their noses. She never begged. She simply sat there, staring at the road as if waiting for someone who would never come. Rafiq watched her for 3 days before he did anything. On this 4th day, when he opened his lunchbox and saw the 2 rotis and a small portion of lentils Hira had insisted he take, he hesitated. Hunger gnawed at him, but something stronger pushed him to stand up. He crossed the street, placed the lunchbox beside her, and walked back without waiting for thanks. He didn't know her name. He didn't ask her story. He just knew that no one deserved to be that alone. The next day, he brought an extra roti. The day after that, he added a boiled egg when he could afford it. It became routine. Every afternoon, he would cross the street and leave food beside her. Sometimes she nodded slightly. Sometimes her eyes filled with tears. She spoke very little, and he never forced conversation. In his heart, he felt he was feeding not just her hunger but something deeper, a reminder that she still mattered. Money grew tighter. There were weeks when business was so slow that Rafiq considered stopping the meals. He would calculate the cost of flour, oil, and rice, telling himself that survival came first. But each time he saw her frail figure through the open workshop door, he remembered his wife's last days in the hospital and the way strangers had shown unexpected compassion. A nurse who stayed past her shift. A man who paid for medicine he couldn't afford. Those small mercies had meant everything. He couldn't forget that. Hira noticed too. One evening, as they shared a simple dinner, she asked why he always carried extra food. Rafiq explained gently that some people didn't have anyone to cook for them. Hira listened carefully, then quietly began saving a portion of her own meals. Sometimes she would wrap half her biscuit from school in tissue paper and hand it to her father the next day. In that tiny room behind the workshop, kindness became a family habit. Months passed, the seasons changed. Rain flooded the street and soaked the woman's shawl. Yet she remained there. On stormy days, Rafiq invited her to sit under the tin awning of his shop. She would sit silently on an old crate while he worked, watching him repair engines with steady focus. the sound of tools hitting metal mixed with the rhythm of falling rain, creating a strange, fragile peace. One evening, she did speak more than usual. Her voice was weak but refined, carrying an accent that hinted at a different life. She told him her name was Selma. She didn't share much else, only that she had once had a family, and now she did not. Rafiq didn't press further. He believed that people revealed their pain when they were ready. Then came the morning that changed everything. Rafiq had just lifted the shutter of his workshop when he heard the low hum of powerful engines approaching. Four identical black SUVs turned into the narrow lane, their polished surfaces reflecting the early sunlight. They moved slowly, deliberately, until they stopped directly in front of his shop. The street fell silent. Doors opened in unison. Men in tailored suits stepped out, scanning the area with sharp eyes. Rafiq's first instinct was fear. He replayed every unpaid bill in his mind. Had he unknowingly repaired a stolen vehicle? Had some powerful customer been dissatisfied? His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear anything else. Hira, who had been sweeping the floor inside, ran to his side and clutched his arm. The suited man approached him, asking his name. Their tone was formal, almost rehearsed. Rafiq nodded, his throat dry. One of them stepped aside, and from the last SUV emerged a woman dressed in elegant simplicity, a cream-colored outfit, dark sunglasses, her posture dignified yet trembling. When she removed her glasses, Rafiq felt the ground shift beneath him. It was Selma, but she was transformed. Her hair was neatly styled, her face looked healthier, though still marked by past sorrow. Behind her stood more individuals, some holding documents, others watching intently. The street buzzed with whispers. Selma walked toward him slowly, her eyes glistening. She looked at the shop, at the cracked walls, at the tools hanging from nails, and finally at Rafiq and Hira. The silence stretched so long it felt unbearable. Then, in a voice steadier than before, she explained everything. Months earlier, after years of isolation and betrayal by distant relatives who had manipulated her during a period of mental and emotional collapse, she had chosen to leave her wealthy life behind. She had once been the majority shareholder of a massive textile company her late husband built. After his death, legal battles and deceit had stripped her of confidence and nearly of her assets. Overwhelmed, she had disappeared from that world, wandering until she found herself on this unremarkable street, stripped of identity and purpose. Her legal team had searched for her for months. When they finally located her, they expected bitterness, perhaps anger. Instead, they found her sitting outside a small workshop, speaking softly about a mechanic who shared his food without asking for anything in return. She had refused to return with them until she was certain she could repay the debt she felt in her heart. Rafiq listened in disbelief. The woman he had fed from his modest lunchbox was not just another forgotten soul. She was powerful, influential, and wealthy beyond his imagination. But what happened next stunned everyone even more. Selma turned to her team and instructed them to bring forward a folder. Inside were documents transferring ownership of a newly purchased, fully equipped auto service center, a 10 times larger than his current shop, into Rafiq's name. It included modern machinery, training programs, and a scholarship fund established for Hira's education through university. She explained that no amount of money could truly repay the dignity he had restored in her darkest days, but she wanted to ensure his kindness multiplied. Rafiq's knees nearly gave out. He had expected perhaps a thank you, maybe an envelope with some cash. This was unimaginable. He looked at Hira, whose eyes shone with confusion and hope. He thought of the nights he had gone to bed hungry so she could eat. He thought of his wife's smile. Tears streamed down his face freely, unashamed. Neighbors who once overlooked him now stared with awe. The same street that had witnessed his quiet struggles was now witnessing a miracle. Yet the most powerful moment wasn't the legal papers or the SUVs. It was when Selma knelt slightly to Hira's level and told her that her father had reminded her that humanity still existed. She said that true wealth was not measured in bank accounts but in the ability to care for someone who could offer nothing in return. Business at the old shop changed overnight. News spread quickly through the neighborhood and beyond. Customers came not just because of curiosity but because they trusted a man who had proven his character. Within months, Rafiq moved operations to the new service center. He hired young men from struggling backgrounds, offering them training and fair wages. He kept the old, rusted signboard and hung it inside the new building as a reminder of where he started. Despite the sudden change in circumstances, Rafiq remained the same at heart. Every Friday, he and Hera prepared meals and distributed them to those in need. Selma often joined them quietly, no cameras, no announcements. She rebuilt her company too, but this time with a renewed sense of purpose, investing in community programs and shelters. One evening, long after the chaos of that extraordinary day had settled, Rafiq stood outside the new workshop watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and violet. Hera stood beside him, her small hand in his. He realized that the SUVs had not arrived to punish him or to disrupt his life. They had arrived as proof that kindness could never disappear into emptiness. It travels, it echoes, and sometimes, when you least expect it, it returns multiplied. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of even the smallest act of goodness, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that restore faith in humanity. And before we end, comment the word kindness below if you believe simple acts can create extraordinary change. Rafiq once thought he was just a struggling mechanic trying to survive another day. He never imagined that sharing 2 pieces of bread could alter his destiny. But perhaps that's how miracles work. They don't begin with grand gestures. They begin with a tired man, a hungry stranger, and a choice to care. In a world that often feels loud and unforgiving, remember this: you may never see the full impact of your compassion, but that doesn't mean it isn't transforming someone's life. And one day, when you least expect it, the doors you open for others may open for you too.